Good morning once again from the International Space Station Flight Control Room at the Johnson Space Center in Houston. At this hour, the Orbit 2 team of flight controllers on console preparing to act in a several-step fashion to bolt the SpaceX Dragon cargo craft into place on the Earth-facing port of the Harmony module of the International Space Station. You're looking at Dragon as we are just minutes away from the point at which we will be in the ready-to-latch position. That will be the precursor to the bolting of Dragon in place, a stair-step fashion in which 4 gangs of 4 bolts apiece, 16 bolts in all, will be commanded to drive Dragon into a first stage capture, then a second stage capture to form a hard mate to that port to which Dragon will spend the next month attached to. It was just 2 hours ago that the Dragon craft was captured by astronauts Tim Peake of the European Space Agency, who operated the station's Canadarm2 robotic arm with the assistance of NASA's flight engineer Jeff Williams on board the International Space Station to culminate a flawless 2-day rendezvous that began with the Dragon's launch atop a SpaceX Falcon 9 rocket from the Cape Canaveral Air Force Station in Florida back on Friday afternoon. Dragon spent a flawless rendezvous of 2 days, executing all of its burns to perfection, sidling up to within a few feet of the International Space Station. Peake then operating from the cupola workstation, the robotics workstation in the cupola, extended the robotic arm to grapple onto a grapple fixture on Dragon at 6:23 a.m. Central Time, 7:23 a.m. Eastern Time, as the International Space Station and the Dragon flew 250 statute miles over the Pacific Ocean west of Hawaii. At that point, Peake and Williams turned over the robotic operation to the robotics officer here in Mission Control in Houston. This is a good view about an hour and a half ago, right after the capture of Dragon, which shows a very signature portrait of not only the Dragon at the end of the robot arm, but on the right side of your screen, the orbital ATK Cygnus craft that arrived at the station back on March 26th to begin the train of arriving cargo vehicles that also included the Russian ISS Progress 63 cargo vehicle. Cygnus arriving at the station back on March 26th, and then just 8 days ago, the Progress resupply craft automatically docking to the aft port of the Zvezda service module of the International Space Station. So with Dragon's arrival, 3 vehicles arriving at the station in a 15-day period to deliver some 12 tons of supplies and experiments, and this graphic showing only the second time in space station history that 6 visiting vehicles have been at the station at the same time, the first time since the STS-133 mission, the final flight of Discovery, back in 2011. The International Space Station and Dragon about to be bolted into place on the Earth-facing side of the Harmony module, currently flying 250 miles above the Earth, moving from southwest to northeast, just to the east of Argentina, in an orbit inclined 51.6 degrees to either side of the equator. Once we get confirmation of first and second stage capture, the crew on board the station monitoring the common berthing mechanism bolting operations will then be free to conduct a series of leak checks on both sides of the berthing interface between Dragon and the Harmony module before outfitting the passageway or vestibule, the small passageway that connects the station side of the berthing interface to the cargo vehicle itself. The hatch to the Dragon spacecraft will not be opened until the wee hours on Monday, allowing the crew to begin to unload most of the time-critical science experiments, including the rodent research habitats that will be transferred from Dragon to the Destiny Laboratory of the International Space Station. And in the trunk of Dragon, at the very top of the spacecraft, or actually the bottom of the spacecraft as you're looking at it relative to the Earth, inside the unpressurized trunk of Dragon lies the beam, the Bigelow Expandable Activity Module, that will be extracted by the robotic arm next Saturday morning in the wee hours and maneuvered to an installation on the aft port of the Tranquility module of the International Space Station. Once installed, then in late May, it will be expanded to its volumetric dimensions. The crew will be free then to enter beam for the first time about a week after it's expanded to see how everything is going inside. This is a prototypical test of the first expandable module to be attached to the International Space Station in what could be the precursor to other expandable habitats that will be used for deep space exploration in the future. So once again, for the third weekend in a row, a cargo vehicle has arrived at the International Space Station, with the Dragon having been captured at 6:23 a.m. Central Time, 7:23 a.m. Eastern Time, just over 2 hours ago, and now has been maneuvered in place as we stand by for the robotics officer here in Mission Control to inform our flight director on console, Zeb Scoville, who is now in charge of the Orbit 2 team of flight controllers on console with spacecraft communicator Cindy Kester, as we await the actual installation and bolting in place of the Dragon cargo craft. In all, the Dragon is carrying about 7,100 pounds of cargo to the International Space Station, as well as experiments, some 3,789 pounds of pressurized cargo inside. The unpressurized cargo, about 3,400 pounds, including the 3,100 pounds belonging to the Bigelow Expandable Activity Module itself. Again, the timeline for beam and its extraction now calls for it to be grappled and unlatched from the trunk of Dragon early Saturday morning of next week, April 16th, and to be maneuvered in place to be installed and bolted in place on the aft port of the Tranquility module, where it will spend the next 2 years being tested. Operating the station's robotic arm, the robotics officer here in Mission Control is moving very slowly, very carefully to ease the Dragon into the ready-to-latch position, as it is called. Once that is accomplished, then we will begin to see the bolting of the Dragon take place. Again, 4 gangs of 4 bolts apiece, some 16 bolts that will be commanded to drive the Dragon into a hard mate to the International Space Station. Later today, Jeff Williams and Tim Copra will be in charge of outfitting the vestibule, the passageway between Dragon and the Harmony side of the berthing interface of this common berthing mechanism. The CBM, or Common Berthing Mechanism controller assemblies, will be removed, and that will set the stage for the actual opening of the hatch to Dragon in the early morning hours on Monday. And here in the flight control room, the robotics officer has informed Flight Director Zeb Scoville that we are just about at the ready-to-latch position. It will take just a few more minutes, and we'll be standing by for that call, the precursor to the start of the bolting of Dragon in place. All of Dragon's systems operated to perfection following its launch on Friday, and its placement into its preliminary orbit 10 minutes after launch, a couple of minutes after spacecraft separation from the second stage of the SpaceX Falcon 9 rocket. The Dragon unfurled its solar arrays and began the pre-programmed methodical firing of its engines and its thrusters to rendezvous with the International Space Station, arriving earlier this morning, where it was captured over the Pacific Ocean west of Hawaii by European Space Agency flight engineer Tim Peake, who was the prime operator for the Canadarm2 robotic arm. As Dragon moved to within a few feet of the station, Peake extended the robotic arm, grappled onto Dragon, and then once Dragon was securely grasped, Peake, along with NASA astronaut Jeff Williams, handed over the robotic chores to the robotics officer here in Mission Control. The extraction of the Bigelow Expandable Activity Module next Saturday morning will strictly be in the hands of the robotics team here in Mission Control in Houston, as they command the two sets of latches that hold the beam in place in the trunk of Dragon and extract beam, maneuvering it over to the aft port of the Tranquility Module, where it too will be bolted in place to a common berthing mechanism on that port of what is known as Node 3, or Tranquility. The installation of a visiting vehicle to a common berthing mechanism, always a very slow and methodical process. As we stand by for further word now from the robotics officer that we are in the ready-to-latch orientation. Just a couple of centimeters now separating the Dragon's passive common berthing mechanism to what is called the active common berthing mechanism. That's on the Harmony side of this berthing interface. The International Space Station flying 250 statute miles over the South Atlantic, moving from southwest to northeast, soon to cross the west coast of Africa. The robotics officer now reports that we have 4 ready-to-latch indicators. The sensors at the berthing interface all showing a good alignment. So we are now standing by for the process of the start of bolting. First, we will get the indication and confirmation of first stage capture, followed by second stage capture, which is the demarcation point that we have a hard mate between Dragon and the Harmony module's Earth-facing port.
Station Houston on 2 for Tim Copra and CBM.
Go ahead on 2.
Tim, we are ready for you to get into your planned activity for CBM capture able. I have a few more details whenever you're ready to copy.
I am ready to copy.
All right, in Struck and Mech procedure 1.522. In step 1, I can confirm the maneuver to RTL is complete. You are go for first stage capture. Additionally, looking ahead to step 3, I can confirm we are in a good attitude config and Russian thrusters are disabled.
Hey, sounds great. I show 4 green RTLs and picking up in step 2.
Houston copies.
Expedition 47 Commander Tim Copra monitoring the common berthing mechanism procedures and the bolting of Dragon into place, which will commence here momentarily. Copra, Tim Peake, and cosmonaut Yuri Malenchenko now in their 118th day in space. Jeff Williams and his 2 Russian cosmonaut crewmates who he launched with, Alexei Ovchinin and Oleg Skripochka, now in their 23rd day in space. Jeff Williams will succeed Copra as space station commander once Copra, Peake, and Malenchenko depart the International Space Station in June. Jeff Williams, now in his 3rd long-duration mission to the International Space Station and 4th visit overall, the first coming on a space shuttle assembly flight, will take over as commander of the station in June until his return to Earth in September.
And Houston Station on 2 for CBM in step 3. All exercises halted, and thanks for the go. Picking up. step 4.
Houston copies. Concur with step 4.
Houston Station on 2 for CBM. All latch capture switches are open, and your go for SSRMS mode to limp.
Houston copies. Loading to limp in work.
That call by Commander Tim Cobra indicating that the station's robotic arm will now be placed in the so-called limp mode so that no uncommanded motion of the arm would interfere with the initiation of the bolting of Dragon to the Earth-facing port of the Harmony module. First stage capture now complete. Standing by for second stage capture.
Complete. Go for second stage capture.
Copy that, picking up at 5.2.
Houston copies and concurs.
And Houston in 5.2 for the verify override command capture, commanded yes and execute, and under the CBM status, command rejected flag is confirmed with yellow triangle.
Stand by, Tim. We're looking into it. Tim, we see the same on the ground. To reconfigure, if you could repeat the command sequence in step 5.2, starting with the command capture to 130 degrees and execute.
Okay, I'll start from the top of 5.2.
Good readback.
And Houston Station on 5.2 is complete and picking up 5.3.
Houston sees the same. We concur with 5.3.
And confirmation of second stage capture. Dragon now bolted to the International Space Station at 8:57 a.m. Central Time as the station passed 250 miles over southern Algeria. Once again, a hard mate now between Dragon and the International Space Station's Harmony module. Second stage capture confirmed at 8:57 a.m. Central Time, 9:57 a.m. Eastern Time, as the station flew 250 miles over southern Algeria.
And Houston starting with 5.4.
Houston concurs, 5.4.
And Houston, all 4 latches are 11 degrees going to step 6.
We concur with step 6.
This is Mission Control Houston, and there is a signature shot that illustrates the cargo vehicle activity that has taken place at the International Space Station. On the left, the newly attached SpaceX Dragon cargo vehicle that just arrived at the station today. And on the right side of your screen, you're looking with the solar arrays, those Ultraflex solar arrays, at the orbital ATK Cygnus cargo craft that arrived on March 26th. With Cygnus's arrival, then the arrival of the ISS Progress 63 Russian resupply vehicle 8 days ago, and today the Dragon vehicle some 12 tons of supplies and experiments delivered to the International Space Station. And as the station flies 250 miles over the Mediterranean, this for the first time showing the two U.S. commercial cargo ships, Dragon on the left, Cygnus on the right, attached to the station at the same time. Dragon will remain attached to the International Space Station until May 11th. Cygnus's departure 9 days after that, currently targeted for a departure on May 20th. Next step for the crew will be the installation of equipment on the vestibule, the connecting passageway between Dragon and the Harmony side of the berthing interface inside the International Space Station that will lead to the opening of the hatch to Dragon in the early morning hours on Monday morning. And next Saturday, the unberthing and attachment of the Bigelow expandable activity module, the beam that is housed inside the trunk of Dragon, that will be robotically removed by robotic flight controllers here at Mission Control in Houston and maneuvered for an attachment to the aft port of the Tranquility module, where it will spend the next 2 years being tested as a prototype for expandable habitats that may be used one day for deep space exploration. So with that, we'll wrap up our coverage for today. Dragon now bolted to the International Space Station, having been captured at 6:23 a.m. Central Time and bolted into place with second stage capture confirmed at 8:57 a.m. Central Time. Closing on one programming note, we'll be recapping all of the SpaceX activity and all of the latest news for the Expedition 47 crew aboard the International Space Station on Monday with our Space Station live broadcast at 10 a.m. Central Time, 11 a.m. Eastern Time on NASA television. In the meantime, Dragon safely secured and bolted in place at the International Space Station. With that, we'll wish you a great Sunday. Enjoy the rest of your weekend. This is Mission Control Houston.